one of the things that I found in my experience is around perfectionism. Now, that could be, say, all or nothing thinking. I think it is. It's had a lot to do with that. But also this drive or this value to accomplish. But it's an insatiable thirst. And what it looks like and what it feels like is that you might really strive to do things, the pursuit, which is great. But when you get to the outcome, there's almost like, and Andrew Huberman talks about this, about the dopamine hit and the dopamine drive. But why I wanted to talk about this and why it's so important is because recently I saw a self-acceptance survey, and why that blew me away and why I wanted to bring it here and to talk about. Alan Watts has a great quote where he talks about raising kids, and as we get them on, we don't just say, here, welcome to the planet, and here's a few rules that you may get through, and also maybe when you get old enough, you'll work some out and add some, and you'll improve to the process as well. And what we don't is that we make it conditional. So you go to kindergarten on this, and then you're compared. You go to school and you get your A, B, C's, and now you're working towards something. Then you go to maybe secondary school, it's the same. University, it's the same. Finally, when you graduate, you're out into the workforce, and step one is that you're now new, and you're constantly into this new, and you're constantly on probation. And so he describes that we treat humans as probationary humans. Rather than saying, your worth when you come out is this, it's full at 100%. You can add or subtract, what your skills are, but we seem to envelope the whole thing into one. And I think that's true. Now, for whatever reason, at some point, I made the decision to associate my worth with my performance. And for a long time, I love mastery. I love working things out. It's driven me to do a lot of things, and maybe it's the right thing. I think Chris Williamson talks about this on Modern Wisdom, where the reasons that you do things in the beginning, don't talk to successful people, because all of the things that they get to weren't a balanced lifestyle, when they were doing it to get there. And once they get there, all of us, when you're in a situation, looking back in retrospect and explaining it is how you got there is a very difficult process. So I'm conscious of that as well. But I think in terms of perfectionism, I want to get further into that. Again, to Chris Williams and to those crew might say that you want, and I forget who it was, he was interviewing, but he talks about the idea you want something. All the successful people have something that they're running from, and something that they're being driven towards. So you almost want that drive to be running from a saber-toothed tiger, and also that drive to that thing that you want to get. And two of those things together really drive the momentum forward. So I think there's some truth in that. And I've certainly been ambitious to drive towards things in that. But I really want to get to the center of it. Is for a long time, I made the mistake of associating worth with those accomplishments. So if I was doing really well, I was great. If I wasn't, or I felt that my worth was under threat, and because I associated with that with performance, it drove me to perform. But it also just to look at things would go wrong. And I might, on one part, it says, well, these are a heap of skill sets. I've got the skills of thinking about things that can go wrong and mitigating for them, grading project management, thinking about all those pre-mortems. But there's also a time where you double down and overclock and over-index on those things, and it just creates misery. And the reason I want to talk about this is a lot of people are talking, like in YouTube lately, where they're quitting after many years because they can't handle the cycle, or they're now externally driven because the number of likes, and they've got massive audiences that they're now accountable for. And if I think about it, for the same reason that I wanted to do this, was to come and explore and come and drive, and based on that curiosity, that's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to learn some skills to be able to do it, and it'd be great if we got in contact, or if I got in contact with like-minded people and sharing my ideas. That would be awesome. Also driven by the idea of giving back. But there is something here in learning how to do this, setting this, the lighting, the camera, all that's the enjoyable bit. That's the creativity. That's the mastery. That's the doing it for me. I think it was Rick Rubin said that in creating something, you want to do something that is the best that you can do, and then wanting to share that. Right? You're not doing it for the audience. You want to, and it's weird because in the market, in the capitalistic market, says that you can't just go and make things and hope to sell them, and the market will just do a bit like YouTube, right? But there's also a piece in this that says this is what I want to do. Like the question is, if the money wasn't here, what would I do? Would I do this anyway? And the irony is that I do recordings. I've done these. I've wanted to explore my ideas for so long. I do it anyway, money or not. And this is the thing that I want to anchor to here, because if this ever did become successful, I want to remember these grassroots. If it doesn't become successful and this goes nowhere, I still want to remember the reason that I did it. And it's this anchor. Many years ago, I was in a band at 16, 17, and it did really well. You know, we were teenagers. We were in the soundtrack of those formative years, and it was great. It got really big. And then over the time, it became a slog, and it wasn't something that was enjoyable. And there was fame involved, and all of a sudden, I was in the spotlight. As an introvert, that wasn't the greatest thing, but I really felt the performance thing then. You know, it wasn't the reason that I started. It was something new. It was a breakaway. It was a rebellion. It was doing something that was exciting. It was an adventure. And then over the time, it didn't become that. And a lot of things like that. So wanted to go to school, wanted to go to university, got to university, had this Dead Poets Society idea of university where all the knowledge would come. Or a bit like when you walk into a library and, you know, all the knowledge that your mind will explode. And it doesn't. And it didn't. And over time, university became this other thing. I didn't know what it was anymore. It wasn't a place that I was to learn. And again, Alan Watts, I think, talks about the idea that of this compulsory learning that, okay, and we do it in schools now, it's like resilience. You will be resilient or else. And then they put it in the curriculum, or creativity, you know, put it into the curriculum, and you're now graded on it. And this compulsory nature, and Alan Watts talks about the nature of play. And I think that's where I'm coming around on all of this, where the notion of play and enjoyment. Ali Abdaal talks about, he started in his book, or when the course where it's all productivity, right? And he was going to do productivity, but in the end, he calls it feel-good productivity because he comes back to emotions. But in that, he talks about how to make things fun. And in his example of his growing in YouTube, he gives the example, and given that a lot of people are quitting, and I'm sure the bigger ones, the notable ones are breaking away from it because it's become something else for them, or those that have gathered teams and then realize that they're not very good at management. It all takes you away from the thing that you're trying to do originally and trying to create authentically. And this is the thing. It has play involved, doesn't it? And Jordan Peterson, I would watch in his early days when he's trying to work out ideas. When he was at his best is when he was in discussions with Sam Harris and all the Weinsteins, and you could see that immersive and what's the word, where things, they would immerse them and you're there like a fireside chat. But you could see that they're thinking about things. At some particular times, Jordan Peterson had already made up his idea about things, and you could see he retrofitting conversations into his existing structure. What was really exciting to watch was Jordan Peterson figuring things out. And I think he even applies that in his and he goes around, he asks a question, and then he works it out on the fly. It is that creative act that is so wonderful to watch, you know, on the trapeze. So that's the intellectual version of that. And in the same way, some of these recordings I want to leave open, have a structure, but also just talk about things, as today I'm talking about perfectionism. But what we're nailing here is the notion of play and the notion of skills and play, and why you start things to where you end up, instead of, you know, getting wrapped up in the idea of the outcome. It does become the journey. Now you do want, obviously, you know, finish an outcome, have a direction where you travel. So you need both, but focus on the process and the enjoyment and the play. I think for me, that's what was missing, the play and enjoyment. And you would even find, again, back to Alan Watts, is say we work. That's the structure, to then go and play. We work to then earn and play. And if these things that they start out have been enjoyable, my learning about these particular skills has been fun and enjoyable and rewarding. And then at some point it tips over. So maybe you get a few views, maybe it gets into some other thing. But it's, in Ali Abdaal's words around feel-good productivity, it's actually keeping it to the thing and anchored to the thing that you're trying to do in the first place. And that's what I probably struggled with during my career and being is that you get distracted in these external pieces. So perfectionism is really this association of worth in external validation. And what my journey has been about is moving towards that and away from that external validation, which is nice and it's great, but it could be done for its own sake, to more an external driven, oriented self. And that has been really, really hard for me. And I think from a trait openness point of view that I can vouch for is that what's great about openness is you can be open to so many different things and categories and you can't quite land on the thing. And I think this is why in far left and far right, I have no evidence for this whatsoever, but maybe, in some of the kids, it'd be worth testing for trait openness for some of these kids going through, trying to find out who they are, because I've still, for many years of my life, haven't been clear and had a good sense of self. Maybe that's a disorder, maybe it's not. But in terms of trait openness, I think that's where it is. The advantage is that you can travel, you can be open to many things, but the disadvantage is there's a hard sense of getting it on, a strong sense of identity. The next piece in this is to really, what does that mean around perfectionism and how is this related? I think if there's a strong sense, like YouTube likes and clicks and you're catering to the audience a lot, is that it's great, but you lose, it's like you're serving things up to satisfy a taste of others that you will never quite match. I think that's great for developing products and solutions, and I think you need to consider your market and what it is that you're trying to do. Definitely. But there's also a different point where I think coming back to what is sustainable over the longer term, and I think this brings me back to either temperament or personality or the way that you're wired. You'll have a more competitive and sustainable edge, I think, is that if you're doing the things that you really care about. And if you're doing the things that you really care about, you're going to be wired that way. Your brain is wired that way, that you're wired towards your preferences, that your unfair advantage, so to speak, is the things, and it's wired through our culture, isn't it? It's what in the stories and our fables is that just be yourself. Well, what the hell does that mean? It is finding the path inherent to who you are. I think it requires too much energy to be someone else over the longer term, and we've all learnt that. Like, we know that, right? Being in relationships and not being authentic, going through your life and not being who you are, or it's very hard. And some of the 5 regrets of the dying is, I wish that I'd, lived the life that I wanted to, not the one that others wanted me to. So it's the story's there. It's within our culture. It's experienced, and I think the journey is to actually, really find out, who you are. And so self-awareness is a key thing. Gary Vee talks about this, self-awareness as a key driver. Gary Vee talks about a great mum that inserted that confidence, but he talks a lot about the reason people won't post is because of that fear of judgment from others, right? So it's holding them back. Someone else said that a lot of the big decisions in life are usually held back or based on because of what other people think. If you sort that out, then the rest of it is easier. It might even be Gary Vee. So it's interesting that he doesn't seem to care, but yet he is on the pulse of that. And he talks to his audiences and has said on 1 or 2 is that of all the people sitting in the room, and I don't know how many people were, he said like 90% won't. You won't post. And he said what is required, and attention is the greatest asset. So you need to be posting regularly. And he said the reason that you won't is that you'll be worried about the judgment of others. So I guess, well, it's not just me, it's widespread. And then you're in these creative economies that are wanting to produce things, but they're not, and they're going and absorbing all of this stuff, all of these how-tos and books and things, and watching YouTube for endless on hours, to not actually do the doing, to do the thing, as Chris Williamson said. Thinking about is not doing the thing. Preparing is not doing the thing. Whatever, doing the thing, and doing the doing is creating, is being, is acting, is acting it out and becoming part of that. So I think, what is the moral of that story? I think perfectionism will stop you from doing that because it's externally oriented. You're thinking about the rewards and the accolades, the likes of others. It's because it's about performance. And the assumption in that is that your worth is driven by externally driven measures. you might say, well, then how the hell do you become internally driven and what's important there? And I think that is the path. That is the path. And there's actually tools which I'll share in other sessions, and which I have, is you could use AI to actually find out who you are. And it's quite simple. It's not hard. And I think it's, I forget who said it, Harari said that we need to know ourselves before the machines get to know us better than we know ourselves. And why that's important is because I believe that they will. And I've seen how it's possible that you can actually, spew your day into, ChatGPT, and then ask why is this upsetting? Let's say you've got a bad day, and maybe, I know you had a blow-in with your boss, or maybe you had a presentation that didn't go well, or maybe you've got a client that is, is complaining. Maybe you've got projects that are overdue, maybe, who knows? But if you spew all of that out into a statement, you can actually ask, what is the positive values behind that? Is it that make it upsetting? You often find that you care about relationships, that you care about clients, you care about doing well, you want to do it. And all of these positive values are sitting beside literally the negative of it. So positive and negative, it's like literally like a photo. You turn it over, you turn the shitty day that you describe of all the things that went wrong, and you turn it over and you can see the values that are feeding that, and then you get the positive values that you care about. And once you get them, then you understand what the resistance is to giving up those negative feelings. So that's important. But also behind that, you can actually ask, well, what are the driving principles? And Ray Dalio talks about it in Principles, that about improving your principles, right? So based on one set of principles and based on a new set of principles. So what you can actually do with that is have a shitty day, look at the positive values that are driving, those emotions, understand that those emotions are driven by those values. You won't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But you can realign the emotions to getting back to those values. You can have a set of principles on what you're doing. Like you might actually, the principle why your shitty day is going so shitty is that, people are cutting you off in traffic, and you're demanding of yourself and others. And you might be saying of others shouldn't be cutting me off, and of myself that I shouldn't be so upset about this. And of the world, I can't believe everyone's, so shitty in the world and inconsiderate. But behind that could be a value to saying, I really, I want harmony in the world. I want people to be polite and all that. Who knows? I don't know. And then out of that, you could say, well, okay, but the principles are not conducive to adapting to your reality. And what you can say of GPT is, well, what are the principles I'm using? And then what are better principles and better ways that are seeing this, that are also compatible with my values that I care about? So you can do all of that, right? And what I would say is that you need to be doing all of that so you can understand where you come from. Because if you don't, over time, the machines will. And we've seen that example with Cambridge Analytics. That's the example with Facebook ages ago with Brexit, is that they used analytics to pull it all out, and then they sent advertising based on the personality profiles to move the needle on the ones that hadn't made decisions around it. They took all of that, used those principles, and put that data over into, I think, the American election. So they were proving it for Brexit. And then they did it over in the American elections. And sure, so this stuff works. So this data will be taken, and then advertising will be that to nudge you in directions for those that haven't made decisions. Apparently, those that had made decisions on Brexit were right. You can't really move them. But those who are still thinking about it were the ones that were shifting in the margins. So there's an example of data around people and profiles and personality, and then catering and advertising and imagery and all that sort of thing to change your behavior. In that case, voting behavior. So this can be done. And what I would argue is that you need to know yourself. You need to know yourself. And the tools are becoming available to do that. And so, yeah, that's it. So where does this relate to perfectionism and self-acceptance? Well, I think what I was surprised at is I saw a survey, and David Byrne set out a survey measuring, 1, your emotions, 2, your current self-acceptance, and then the resistance to self-acceptance. And what was interesting, and what was really, really clear to me, was the level of emotions that I was feeling on that day, because it had been a difficult week, and then my beliefs around, so, well, how much am I accepting myself, others, the world? And then the resistance to accepting myself, others, and the world. And there was so much resistance in it. And yet I looked very clearly to my emotional level, again, difficult week. And I just saw the relationship between my emotions and the level of self-resistance that I had at that time, low, and my resistance to giving it up. And I just wasn't. I was pushing so hard on my reality, and feeling so crap. And it just broke me out of the spell very clear. So it was clear that I saw the relationship between emotions, self-acceptance, and my resistance to accepting reality, And there's a difference between, and a lot of the resistance was that if I accept reality, somehow I'll lose my edge. If I accept, myself or others, that somehow I'll be giving up. There was such a belief in that I would be giving up, letting go. I couldn't do it. And then after seeing that, I realized a lot of that is in play. And I think this goes back to, the bigger question around, people believe that they've got free will. And I have to look at some of those belief systems that operate literally subconsciously, that run the show and dictate how you act and behave and done. And it's always been said like that, but never had the opportunity without sitting on a couch for maybe 10 years of getting to your belief systems very quickly and efficiently, and you working with something that understands and can empathize with you to change those beliefs if you want to. And there's a big question about beliefs. It's all weird. It's is it like sacred belief systems and all that? How I think about belief systems now is just predictions. So cause and effect belief systems. What you think will happen because of such. What is your belief around yourself and others in the world that you live in? What are the rules that you think the world operates? Do you think it's dog eat dog? Do you think it's a compassionate world? What do you expect is going to happen if you reach out into the world? If you make a video, there's a classic one, right? Perfectionism, or maybe social anxiety. The expectation would be, or the role that I play is to present, and your role is to criticize, and smash it all to bits. And that's a very vulnerable. It's that's social anxiety 101. And the rules are that you criticize and smash me to bits. And that's the whole woke cancellation piece, right? People are terrified of saying anything because setting up the belief is that it's your role to criticize, right? So in public speaking, for example, you're up on stage and you're just seeing a sea of hostile strangers, right? That would cause social anxiety and performance anxiety. So that's a belief system, right? And I went through some Sandler sales training, and I think that said I've never had sales training ever in my career, and in the last couple of years I was involved. And what I love about it is a common language, and many reasons. But the thing that came out is it said equal business stature, and those who ask questions are the ones that are in the primary role or in the seat of the conversation. And then it makes you think about authority. Like when you're younger, you're taught to not to question authority. You're not to ask questions. And you think about, we were saying about Alan Watts, is that we're making these humans probationary humans, that you can't question, you can't challenge authority. And if anything has happened over the last few years, we've seen how fragile that system is, on our institutions around who has the authority of knowledge. And we're all fighting like cat or dog because no one has the truth, and so what the fuck is going on? And we've got these mixed signals on what reality is, whether it be, sex or gender or religion or left and right, and what is the path forward, So there's a lot there on Ray Dalio and the cycle of life and economic cycles and all that sort of thing. But I think bringing it back to perfectionism is this external belief and validation of self and worth. And the target is to actually get internally oriented. And you can get internally oriented by using some of these AI tools to actually get to the core of what it is that you're believing, and you can shift it and you can have a dialogue with it. I've done Harley as a proof of concept around that, and I think that's what's so exciting in this space around artificial intelligence, is that those things can be scaled and provided for those, whether they're feeling lonely and they don't have anyone to talk to and they're in a world of their own and they can't talk to someone to do that, that they can at least liaise with something that can actually get them in sync to what they're thinking and feeling, and that they can know themselves better, and they may then be in a position to get out of the situation that they've found themselves in. So anyway, that's a long one, but I thought I'd talk about perfectionism. Chris out.